Hi, everyone. This is Raquel.
Hi, and this is Jennifer.
Welcome to Madness Cafe.
This is a feminist podcast where we talk about women's issues, politics, and health and wellness.
And where those issues intersect. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Madness Cafe. Today, Jennifer and I are joined by Becky Mollenkamp. Becky is an accountability coach for smart, high-achieving business owners. She helps them go after their goals without burning out or losing sight of their values. Becky's also an intersectional feminist and conducts her coaching through that lens. For example, acknowledging lived experience and never using blame or shame as tools. That's huge. I love that. I think more people should conduct just their lives in general through that lens of not shaming people. Becky, thank you for all of the work that you're doing, and thank you for being here on the show with us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk. And I always tell people that I think blame and shame are the sharpest tools in patriarchy's toolbox. And that is definitely why I'm a big fan of not using those.
Awesome. That's a very good way to put that.
Yeah. Because when we take issues and make them personal, then it is a really easy way to keep us from looking at the shiny object over here that is the systemic issues, right? So when we make it all about you're the problem, you did this wrong, or you are the problem, then we spend all this time on personal development work and it's all about us. And there is no focus on the fact that it is the systems that are fucked and not us.
Yep. I love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
100%. I have partaken in a lot of that self-improvement culture my whole life. So amazing. I think most of us women probably have.
Yeah.
Becky, can you tell us a little bit about you and your history and how you got started in this work?
Yeah, it's been a journey. I'm actually a journalist by training and trade. I have 2 degrees in journalism. I worked for magazines and newspapers. That was a full career in and of itself. And then in 2010, my brother died of a heroin overdose. And a similar time that I was also going through a divorce and then all of the fallout, economic fallout that happens with that. It was a real awakening for me. And that was the time that sort of changed the trajectory of my life and put me down a new path, which took a long time, but of discovery, personal development work and other work. It started with the personal and then became the outside of myself and realizing that it wasn't just me that was the problem. But through all of that work, I was like, I knew I wanted to help other women feel more powerful. And I didn't know exactly what that would look like. At first, it was maybe I want to be a personal trainer. I'm so glad that that was not the path I ended up choosing now that I've done a lot more work around diet culture. But at the time I was like, that feels really empowering. And then I moved into more sort of general business coaching, then kind of realized like, who am I to be doing business coaching? I don't know enough about the online business space to really be telling people what to do there. And then I sort of called myself a mindset coach, but then for all the reasons I've just shared, I really don't love that term and have found my way to where I am now. But it's been a real journey through those big shifts. And now I'm remarried in a relationship that feels really great with a son who's going into second grade, which is like mind boggling how quickly that all starts to happen. And I live in St. Louis and am like this blazing blue dot in a very crimson sea and trying to figure that out.
Yep. Welcome to my world. The bright blue dot in a big old red state. I live in Georgia. So yeah.
Well, you guys are more purple now, at least than, I mean,
we're getting there.
Yeah.
Well, Atlanta is purplish. Outside Atlanta, still pretty bright red.
Okay. But I will say, your voting outcomes, at least at the federal level, were much different than Missouri, where that will never, I don't want to say never. I hope maybe there'll be change that will happen here, but it is a reliably red state.
Yeah.
Well, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, since you brought up, was around your brother's death. I also had a brother and sister who died both of alcohol, drug-related deaths. I'm sorry to hear about your loss. But one of the things that you said that struck me on your website is you said his death helped you to not settle anymore for good enough. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I had fallen into the good girl mentality, right? Of all the things that we were supposed to do as women. my brother was a chronic underachiever and I was the chronic overachiever. And my brother's
Yes.
actually smarter than me, but just, unfortunately, through a whole host of things that I think were both nature and nurture, he went down a very different path and never used all of those smarts he had. And I was always
Yeah.
the good one. I had to be the good one in my house because we had, not that I believe a whole lot in horoscopes, but we had two Leos that were very like, and I was that Pisces who was like the peacemaker in the middle. And so I spent my life playing that role of like just trying to make everyone around me feel better, and very much fell into those roles as women that we do of like putting everyone else's needs ahead of mine. I need to be the caretaker here, and I need to be a good girl who doesn't cause any more problems. My brother's causing enough problems, so I need to like make everything okay. So I married a good guy and I got a good job and I had a great career and built a beautiful house. And thankfully, the only one of the things I didn't do that I was supposed to was have a kid. I didn't do that inside of that marriage. And I'm forever grateful that I made that choice where I put my foot down on that and said, I'm not going to do that thing that I'm supposed to, but I did all of the things you're supposed to do. And on paper, my life looked really good. I had a really great on paper life where we could travel and we had money and people would look at and I had a job that people thought was amazing, but I wasn't happy. I wasn't fulfilled at all. It didn't feel great. It looked really good and it made me seem like a good person and a good girl, but it wasn't fulfilling. I would have probably, if my brother hadn't died, I don't know. I can't say for sure, but I feel like I might have just gone the rest of my life living this really good on paper life. I felt like I was supposed to be grateful for the life I had. Like I should be thankful for this beautiful life I
Yeah.
had, right?
Yeah.
And that me saying I wasn't felt like, who am I to say
Yes.
no to this life that's supposed to be so great? But that was really that wake up call of my brother dying at 30 to say, it just is the thing I needed to shake me and say, life is short. Life is short.
Mhm.
Stop it. Stop it. Stop living for everyone else. It was a tough couple of years that followed of trying to figure out, okay, how do I stop doing that? But thankfully, it was the thing I needed. And I feel like the thing that helps me with his death is feeling like the life I'm living now is part of his legacy, because the fact that that was what it took to shake me out of that and to put me on a new trajectory, all of the happiness that I feel now, my son, all the things that I have now, I feel like I owe to him. And that's part of his legacy then. And that makes it feel like that gives me a gratitude that I know can sometimes be hard to have in the case of a death that feels like it was too soon.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to think of your life in those terms of being his legacy or a legacy to him, that you're living a life that maybe he didn't get a chance to live. You're still here and you're having the joy and the satisfaction and fulfillment that he didn't get a chance to experience.
Yeah. And it's that reminder that the things that we do have impacts beyond what we recognize. So we often think of legacy as like my children or things like that, right? But
Yeah.
just the ways that you show up, and even things that you don't even mean to do, like it's amazing the ripple effect that it can have, and the ways that you can be having impacts on the way other people are showing up and living and you don't even know. And so I don't know, I love that as that reminder too, that I don't even know what impact my life is having. This episode, the podcast in general, and this episode, like we don't know who might hear it and how it might affect them. And I love thinking about that too, of like all of that's part of the legacy that we're creating.
That's brilliant. Another thing that you brought up several times already, you said the word should, and how should had affected you and how that has changed in your work moving forward. And I understand you work mostly with female entrepreneurs or female CEOs. How do you translate that should for them?
Yeah, I mean, so much of my work I feel like is about unlearning, the same way that I've done so much unlearning in the last decade or more, and helping my clients with that process of the unlearning, even more than the relearning. But we are so conditioned, especially as women, and then even more so for anyone who holds, another marginalized identity, are so conditioned into these beliefs around how we are supposed to show up, what we are allowed to do, to think, believe. And I think so much of my work is really about holding space for people and asking the kinds of questions that allow them to start to really question these things that we don't question until we're confronted with it, until someone helps us like sort of break through that stuff, right? We're fish swimming in water and we don't recognize the water, right? Because we're just in it. And until someone says to you, hey, have you noticed this water you're swimming in? And you kind of suddenly have to go like, wait a minute, you mean I'm in water? Like I didn't even know, right? And then having somebody confront you with that is to me, that is the most important part of that work, is the unlearning piece of being able to see what, if you haven't seen it or recognized it, you can't change it. So the seeing is such a big part of it. So I love helping people with that, to help them start just saying like, who made you believe that? Where did that come from? Who's benefiting from you thinking or feeling or acting that way? Because often we don't explore that. And these things that we think are like, again, that kind of goes to this shame and blame, or being these tools to keep us from looking at the systemic. When we sit here and do all this self-exploration, we often say, I'm a problem here, right? There's something wrong with me that I'm thinking this way, acting this way, showing up like this. And when someone else can finally say, who's benefiting from you thinking that way? And when the answer is an obvious, well, not me,
Right.
then that's where that probing can come to say, then who is? Because we wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't in service of something. And often with a little help of somebody who's done some of that work, people can start to say like, holy shit, yeah, it is whoever. It's the people who are holding the power. It's the people that are running the corporations that are selling me the things that are making me think that I like this will solve this thing that's wrong with me. Diet culture is a big one of those, right? The wellness complex, industrial complex is part of that. And so, yeah, I think just so much of the work becomes about unlearning and seeing the stuff that we don't always see.
I know you said in the beginning that you don't like the sort of phrasing of around mindset coaching, but this sounds a little bit to me like you're getting people to look at their mindset and maybe change it. What am I missing in that conversation, and for why you don't like that terminology?
You're right. Right. Most of the work I do is helping people with the way that they are thinking about things.
Okay.
The problem is most of the people who are calling themselves mindset coaches or life coaches or coaches in general, which is why I say I want to remove blame and shame from coaching, is that they are making it very much only about the individual, right? So this is about the way you're thinking about yourself and your circumstances, change your thoughts, change your life, where that is true. But also there is so much outside of you that you don't get to change. I don't get to tomorrow say, I'm going to end sexism. I'm going to end racism. I live inside of these systems that I can't individually, without collective action and without time, change, right? So they're not going away. But to say that the reason that you are feeling, like you should be a good girl is all about you, that's bullshit. It's not all about you, because we live in very real systems that are reinforcing that constantly, and not just reinforcing it in like making you feel a way, but it's legitimately affecting how you are living in the world, right? There are very real things that affect how much money you are making, how you are treated when you are out, your safety out in the world. And I'm just speaking strictly for women. And again, every other marginalized identity you hold is just adding more to that. And when the coaching world makes everything down to, well, if you could just basically toxic positivity, if you could just be more happy, if you could just smile more, feel better, think happy thoughts, then everything's going to suddenly be different. We have the capacity and the agency to make changes within ourselves and how we are seeing the world, how we are interacting with the world, but we don't get to change some of these big giant things. They're not going away tomorrow. And you suddenly feeling more positive won't make that change, right?
Yeah.
And I think that any coaching that doesn't understand that and hold space for that and help people see that is really failing people. It's harmful because it is suddenly making it about you. You're a problem here. And what does that do to you when you have to go back out in the world and this is being reinforced in so many ways every day? And then what? We keep saying, no, it's me. Oh, yeah. Oh God, there's more examples of how I'm failing. You're not failing. These systems are failing you. You do have some power within how you show up within that and how you choose to use the feelings of that, right? Like some of that we can harness into righteous anger and things like that. But to act as if it is only you and it is just your mindset that's the problem, that is just so deeply problematic. And it's what I see again and again and again.
It reminds me of recycling. Like we're all in our house trying to do all this recycling, and my kids and I are traveling around with plastic cups and straws, and yet then we see this big barge of garbage going by from the corporation, and we're like, what does my straw matter?
Right, factory farming, all the things that we don't have control over. And it's
Right.
the same in all of these silos of the wellness industry, of the food
Yeah.
industry, of the everything. That is it, that's why I say blame and shame. It's the sharpest tools patriarchy has, because in every one of these arenas, the systems, the people in power will go out of their way to make sure that you feel like it's a you problem. Because if it's a
So we're
you
all
problem, it's not a them problem, right? If it's about
right.
you not
Right.
doing your job recycling, then it doesn't matter how much they're polluting or how our,
Yeah.
even more so, how our government officials are failing us to enact laws that would actually make change.
Right.
Because we know that corporations will never make change unless they're forced to make change, because it's, capitalism will always be
It's
about
not
greed.
profitable.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so,
Right.
yes, the more we make it about you as an individual, the less we have to deal with the other stuff. And then nothing changes, which is exactly
Right.
the point. But the more that I think that we, like, in my hope, my little piece of how I chip away at patriarchy and these issues is, the more that we can as individuals unlearn all of that, unlearn this belief that it is all us, that we are a problem, the more we unlearn that, then those of us who've done that work, we start to collectively say, let's come together and put our attention, that righteous anger that we now feel, where it needs to be to make change happen. But that doesn't happen when we're all sitting in this little shell feeling crappy about ourselves. No real change, no sustainable change has ever come out of shame. It doesn't work. It is not an impetus for change.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it makes me think about, the whole law of attraction and abundant mindset kind of stuff. Like, yes, definitely try to have a good attitude and that kind of stuff. Yes, definitely. But it's almost like, or at least this is what I feel this sometimes when I see some of the stuff. It's like, if you don't say these affirmations, or if you have a negative thought, then that's the reason why you're having money trouble, or that's why you didn't attract whatever. And like you said, it's putting the blame on the individual. Like, your situation sucks because you suck, or you didn't do this one thing right, as opposed to, like you're saying, there's so much more at play that has a direct effect on somebody's situation. Systemic racism, patriarchy, capitalism, sexism, like all these other things that are at play, that as one person alone, you might be able to affect some change, but you're not going to change the whole structure.
Yeah. And not only does it then protect the systems, and so those people that hold the power benefit, but the people who are often perpetuating this problem are not those people, right? It is not the wealthy 1% that own us all, right? It is people who are affluent, they're doing well. Let's be honest, it's usually privileged white women that we see, and men, but a lot of white women that are doing this, right? Especially in this wellness space, the Gwyneth Paltrows of the world, and others who don't have as much money as her, who are perpetuating this message. And what I think is at play, whether it's conscious for them or not, and more than likely it's not, is if they can make it seem that the people who, because often it's like liberal white ladies even, right?
Yes.
If they can
Yes.
make it seem like the reason that those people, other people, don't have the success I have is because it's their own fault. It's their own thinking that's a problem. Then they don't have to confront for themselves the privilege that they hold. They don't have to confront for themselves the ways they're not using their privilege to do anything to make a difference, to actually make meaningful change. I get to sit here and feel righteous in myself and say, oh, but the reason that I am where I'm at is because I did the work. I did the work to change my mindset, right? And if they would just do those things, then they could be where I am without any acknowledgement of all of the benefits that they've had that have helped contribute to them getting there, and the ways that they're continuing to now make money, to extract money out of other people who wish that they had what they had, and not do anything with that privilege and that money to affect change. It allows them to sit in that comfort. And that's why I think we see so many really privileged white women, liberal white women, who are in that space, and it is so deeply harmful.
But they think they're contributing to this mindset coaching.
Yeah, they think they're contributing to making a difference because look, I'm giving you the tools because they haven't done enough work yet to understand because I think they really believe this. This is like Instagram pretty world that exists out there of like, look at my beautiful life. And now I'm going to show you exactly what worked for me to get myself here. So I'm going to hand you these tools. And if you can't use these tools to get here, well, that's a you problem, not a me problem, because I've given you the tools. But the part that they haven't yet done enough deep work to understand is it wasn't just those tools, right? You already were 10 steps ahead when you were born, and you haven't done the work to actually be able to confront that, to say, I could give you all these tools and it still won't matter because of all the other reasons that you are here that you're not acknowledging inside of that. But they feel like, yeah, I'm doing great work here because I'm giving you these tools. They worked for me.
Yeah. Right. And the American dream is if you come to this country and you work hard enough and you hustle hard enough, you can make it too.
And you pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Yeah.
But if you don't have boots and you don't have straps, you don't have anything to pull up.
You don't have any bootstraps.
Yeah, exactly. Then shit.
Absolutely. And if you don't have, arms, like, there's so many advantages that we have. Exactly. Yeah.
So front and center on your website, you say, Black Lives Matter. Trans women are women. Abortion is healthcare. If you disagree with those statements, we aren't a good fit. First of all, kudos to you. That's my new dating mantra. I'm going to steal it from you. But secondly, why so bold? Aren't you afraid you're going to lose clients?
It used to be. Which is why it wasn't always as bold as it is now. Honestly, and it should have happened long before. I mean, this has been I should just go back a little bit on my own story around my unlearning, I think, because it might be helpful here. So I was always a good white liberal. Right. I was a feminist in college and I took some gender studies classes and I wasn't racist and all of that. And I really lived that way for a very long part of my life. I voted Democrat. I volunteered for Obama. Like I did all the things. And I really felt like I could have been Gwyneth Paltrow. I was very much in that place for a long time. And for me, the real beginning of my awakening, I'm in St. Louis, and I lived a mile from where Michael Brown was killed in Ferguson. And that was really, for me, the beginning of my true education and unlearning and deep work. I always thought that I didn't have to do that, I guess, because I felt like I had, because I was raised liberal and I was one of the good ones. But I wasn't, and I needed that awakening. And so it's really only been since then, so it's been a little over a decade about a decade, I guess now, that I've been really on the deep journey of doing the unlearning and truly doing my work. It's been a process where a decade ago, I would not have felt comfortable to put that on my website. 5 years ago, I was getting more vocal because I had done enough work by then to feel like I have some voice here I feel like I can use, although still all the doubts and all the fears that I'm going to say it wrong, I'm going to do it wrong, right? But starting to feel like, okay, I need to speak more. I can't just be in learning mode. I need to now start to use my voice. And I did get more vocal. And I continued to get gradually more and more vocal, but still held on to so much of the privilege that I had to be able to say, I get to choose when I show up this way, right? And honestly, for me, it was the Dobbs decision, overturning Roe, that was where I finally was like, and I want to fully acknowledge all of the privilege that's inside of that, for me to be able to wait till that, right? For me able to say like, oh, now this is the thing that feels important enough, which, I have lots of shame around, but I'm working through that too, because the shame does no good for anyone, right?
Yes, shame is not going to help.
Nope, it does not help, but we all know how that goes. And that was the thing that finally I said, I'm done. And I sent out quite a few emails. I shared my own abortion stories and I got very, very vocal, and I did receive pushback. I lost a client, and that was what made me say, I'm done. I don't want to be in a place where I have the pushback. I don't want to be in the place where I would lose a client, because I want them to know before we ever get to that place. This is where I stand. I don't it's not worth it to me to be afraid to use my voice. So if I put it out from the beginning, then I'm going to turn people away, but they would never have been my people anyway. And then I feel in a way it's actually protecting my boundaries later, so that I don't have that pushback or lose a client later when I speak about something. Because I've made I'm abundantly clear now. And if we aren't on the same page, don't get on my email list. Don't hire me. Don't listen to my podcast. Don't do anything, because we're not going to be a fit. But that definitely was a journey to get to that place.
And so it sounds like you recognize that the journey doesn't really stop. Like the journey continues,
Oh yeah, I have lots of
you
work
know?
to do. I've been interviewing a lot of people for my podcast that's coming out, and I've been asking people about the things that they know, or a lot around like learning edges and where are your
Hmm.
growth edges? Where are you still learning? And I have recognized I still have quite a few. Definitely there's so much unlearning and work I want to do around accessibility because it's a space I haven't done as much because I've had the privilege to not really have to, right? I am
Yeah.
an able-bodied person. I don't haven't had been forced into that. And so that's an area where I know that I still have a lot of unlearning to do. And this Pride, I actually came out I
Hmm.
publicly. That's an area where I didn't realize I had been holding back and had been hiding until I actually sent out an email to my list saying, hey, by the way, I'm queer, I'm bisexual. I mean, I'm in a straight passing relationship, but like this has been my truth. This is my truth. And that was something that was really heavy. And when I sent it, I didn't realize how scared I was. And I didn't realize how much I had been hiding in that arena. And I recognize inside of that there is probably some internalized like homophobia that I need to
Hmm.
deal with that I didn't know was there. Because again, I felt like, no, I love everyone and love is love and all of these things. Right? I've always said that. And I've always
Yeah.
believed it until it was like, oh, but it's me. And that's a
Yeah.
good space to say
Right.
like, ooh, there's something here I need to work on. So I know that it will be a lifelong journey
Hmm.
that I will always be finding stuff because again, it's the water that we've all been in and it is
Hmm.
just so deeply embedded that you will think I've done it now. I have successfully
Yeah.
unlearned it
Yay.
all.
I'm good
And
now. I'm done.
right?
I'm perfect now. I did all
Good
the
for
work.
me. And then there will be something that will shine the light on some recess deep inside of you that you didn't know that it was still lurking. Like, oh, there's another little pocket of that I still haven't excavated. And I know that I will be excavating that stuff until the day I'm gone.
Well, as you
Well,
should, because life is, or should be, continually learning and continually improving where you can. I don't think that's anything to say in a negative way. So you
Yeah.
have more to learn. We all do, you
Yeah,
know?
I don't think of it as negative at all, but I do know that I have enough privilege and am in spaces with enough people who also have privilege that I understand that idea that like, you mean I can never get to the finish line? I can never, especially when it is, I think really the root of it is, you mean I can never do this perfectly? Because perfectionism, as we know, is such a component of white supremacy. And that idea of like, you mean I can't do this perfectly holds so many people with privileged identities from even wanting to get into the battle, get into the
Yeah.
arena, because that is so scary to say, I'm going to get into this arena and you are telling me I will mess up again and again. I'm going to get knocked down again and again. I'm going to do this wrong over and over. I will never be able to reach a finish line or be perfect. That holds so many people back because it goes against, again, everything that we're conditioned into. And
Hmm.
so
yeah.
like, I think it's wonderful to think I have so much more growth to do, but I know that thought is really scary for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that is the place to check yourself because boy, what comfort and privilege inside of the belief that like, oh, I don't have to get into the arena because it feels too scary.
Hmm.
Wow. That's a lot of
Hmm.
privilege. Like, I don't know for sure who would be hearing this, but if there's some piece of you, which I can fully understand, I do like, I also hold enough of that privilege to know what that feeling is of like, it can feel defeating of like, you mean I will never be able to do this? What, right. I will always have more to do. Oh, that can feel overwhelming. But that's all the more reason that you need to get into the arena and like do the work.
Well, you brought up your new podcast and we're excited to learn about it. Can you tell us about this new project and what's coming?
I'm so excited. Yeah, it's going to be called Feminist Founders. It's launching in September. I've already done most of the first season interviews, and I could not be more excited to share with everyone that's coming out. These are sort of long form conversations with feminists who are running businesses and who want to
Cool.
do business differently. They want to say,
Nice.
like, what does it look like to be successful? These
Hmm.
are not people who are saying, like, oh, I don't want to make a penny. We want to make money. But how do we do that in an anti capitalist,
Hmm.
anti racist, anti sexist kind of way? What does that look like to do business differently? And exploring that with people both who are running businesses and trying to do it differently, and then those who are a bit more on the like side of experts who are trying to help people do it differently, and talking about everything, finance and mindset and
Hmm.
selling, sales and marketing, and all of the components of running a business where we really are putting people and planet over profits.
Oh my
Hmm.
goodness. What's one big takeaway that you said you've done your interviews? Is there something you learned already and you were like, oh my gosh, I can't wait for this to get out there?
I mean, I've been learning so much from everyone that every time I'm like, oh, there's some like I'm learning a lot and I feel like I've done a lot of work. I mean, I think a big piece of it is kind of some of what we've talked about of like there's always going to be more that you can do. And so
Mm-hmm.
you can't do it perfectly. And I feel like that is something that again kind of keeps people from wanting to eat. Like you feel like why bother? We live in this late stage capitalism. This is the world
Yeah.
I'm in. I can't change that. So I might as well get mine too, right? I
Yeah.
know that feeling. And it does feel like trying to make that difference is swimming upstream and it feels really hard.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the little ways, and that's what I'm most excited is some of the like just the small things that are practical that can say like we can do it differently. Just hiring people at a living wage, right?
Oh,
Just because you
yay.
Yeah. Yeah.
just because you
Imagine that.
can get somebody in the Philippines or Singapore or wherever it is to work for $4 an hour, does that mean that that is the right thing to do? Or could you also pay them a living wage for the work that they're doing, right? That's not a huge thing, but it's a huge thing, right?
It is
And
a huge thing.
It is.
yeah, and things like,
Yeah.
consent-based marketing. I interviewed Kelly Deals, who I think if you don't know her, she does it so
Yeah.
well. She's a marketing expert, a feminist marketing
Mm-hmm.
expert, and she does consent-based marketing. Anytime I'm on her email list, she sends an email that just says, I'm getting ready to sell to you. Do you want to hear this or not? That's not a big
Wow.
thing. It's one extra email you send out to your list, but it gives people this feeling of agency. Do I want to be receiving these messages from you or do I not? And I get to
Yeah.
choose. And guess what? I've seen all our messages for sales. I'm probably not buying anytime soon, but I don't opt out because I'm still interested to see what it is. The effects of that are not what we are often afraid of. Well, nobody will buy if I give them the chance not to sell. If that's what you're feeling, then what you're not in a good space, right? Because
Right.
if you feel like the only way I can sell to people is in a sleazy, unethical way, there's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot around consent and just the way we pay people, the way we interact with people. There's just been so many of these small things that I think I say small, they're not small, but they are like practical things that we can do on that individual level since we can't just tomorrow say, I wish capitalism away. We can't do that.
Right.
So what does it look
Right.
like to run a business in a way that is ethical and also means you can like make a living?
Well, yeah, but there are things that companies say, well, this can't be done. We can't do this. But what your interviews are showing is that these things can be done.
Mm-hmm.
And they can be done definitely by businesses that aren't like ginormous sized. So why can't they be done by ginormous companies? If small businesses can do it, well, yeah, but it's showing that this can be done, and these businesses can still be successful. So it can be done by the larger businesses as well. But
perhaps to some degree they can, although I interview Sive Harquail, who's also a feminist business expert,
mm-hmm.
and she says, and I think it's absolutely true, that like feminism and capitalism don't coexist. Not the way we are, at least not the way we engage in capitalism now. It's
Right.
a rethinking of our economic system in its entirety. And I do think that puts into question, like, should we, let alone can we, but should we have companies like Amazon, right? Should there be these billion-dollar companies? Should there be, right?
I'm just going to say for everyone out there, no.
I agree. And so, because I think, actually, now that I think about it, maybe the thing that I'm most excited is the idea for people, this challenge to people inside of capitalism to think about what's your enough number. What's enough? We are never, ever challenged inside of capitalism to think about enough. We are only ever pushed to think about more. We need more. We need it now, right? It's about greed, greed, greed. And so much of the stuff that these conversations, so many people over and over again is, how much do I really need to make? How big do I really need this company to get, right?
Yeah.
Do I need to build the next Amazon? No. Do I need to build an empire, as so many of the online business people talk about? I don't want an empire. Empires are bad, right? Like, no, that's not what I'm here to do. It's about doing it differently. What is enough for me that that allows me to live the life that, like, live a good life? It's not about going and joining a monastery. It's about how do I live a good life and pay my people well, get rest. That's another big part of this conversation that's coming up again and again is like, how do we actually honor ourselves as full humans who need to rest and not just work? So it's like redefining success, redefining money, redefining productivity, all of these components. Like, what does it look like when we stop saying, when we get out of the race for more and into this place of what's enough? What's enough?
Right.
And so can the big companies do it? I think they can make very important changes. Absolutely. And they should. Yeah. Also, though, I think some of it's really fundamental, like big picture systemic issues of, do we need these big companies? Should there be these big companies? And I agree. I think the answer is no.
Right. Well, as you said on Instagram, don't win at their game, create a new, better game.
Yeah. Because I think that's a big difference where so much of the like girl boss mentality, I'm quoting here, online, this empowerment movement that, again, it's often very much these privileged white women that are perpetuating. It is about, how do I win at their game? The idea being, well, if we get more money into our hands, that now changes everything. And while I do fundamentally agree that there needs to be a shift in the power structure, and women and people who hold other marginalized identities, absolutely, like, we need more money in their hands. Yes.
Yeah.
And it is not just about saying, instead of Jeff Bezos running a giant empire, it needs to be a woman running that giant empire. The truth is, it needs to be, that system doesn't work. There is no way to do that will not be extractive and harmful to people. We can't do it. It's not a system that works, whether it's men or women at the helm. It doesn't work. It doesn't allow for the full humanity of all people. And so the whole thing needs to change. But too much of what's out there is like, well, if I become a millionaire, then now I am now a feminist because I'm a woman who's a millionaire. You can be a woman who's a millionaire and absolutely not be a feminist when you're still doing it, right? When you're doing it by paying people in the Philippines $2 an hour and never sleeping and not letting your team ever sleep. That this is no longer a feminist ideal, but that's kind of what's been put out there that has become like, this is what feminism looks like, right? In the business space, is it just looks like women doing what men have done, beating them at their game. And that is not it. Like, that's not it, people. That's not it, right? It's about saying that game is rigged. It is harmful. It does not work for us anymore. And this is the game we want to see. It's an entirely new game. Right. It's a difference between a patriarchal and a matriarchal kind of system.
Well, right. And changing the system not only will benefit women, it'll benefit everyone. Right?
We hope. It depends on how we change the system.
Right, exactly. But kind of speaking to the misunderstanding about feminism, it's a rising tide lifts all boats, people. So make the system better for women, make the system better for minorities and marginalized communities. A byproduct of that is that it's going to be better for everybody else too.
That's that difference between girl bossing and intersectional feminism.
Yep.
Girl bossing is usually, the way I almost always see it, is white feminism. Even if it's a Black woman doing it, it's still rooted in this, it's rooted in white supremacy, right? It's this white feminist view of feminism, which is not intersectional and is not, in my opinion, feminism. I think if your feminism isn't intersectional, it's not feminism. But there are plenty of people out there that still would think that they are being these like kick-ass feminists who they're not, they just haven't done enough of that work. And I think for anybody who is really wanting to learn, this is specifically to the white people in the audience, but the white women, White Feminism by Koa Beck is a absolute must-read book. It is fantastic. And it gets to all of these issues of how feminism has failed everyone else. And that's why the first question I ask on every episode of my podcast is, what's your relationship with the word feminist? Because I know that there are, for many people, that is a very difficult relationship. There are many women of color, especially, but also there are white women, and there are women who are in the queer community for whom that is a really difficult word, because it has not always been an inclusive word, right? There, we all know the whole pussy hat, like that whole sort of view on feminism. And I loved I'm a big fan of alliteration. I'm kind of a grammar nerd, so I loved like feminist founders. But I also want to fully, right off the bat with every episode, meet it head on to say, I know that this is a charged word, and that is not a word that has always been a big umbrella. I'm hoping that in some small way, I can be a piece of bringing that back to say, let's open that umbrella, because it is, at its core, it should be a very big tent that we all fit under, but it has not historically always been that way. And for people who don't know enough about that yet, I would please read White Feminism by Koa Beck, because it will open your eyes to all of that.
It's interesting that you bring this up because Raquel and I have had some small little debates recently. I have suggested we take the word feminist out of our podcast title, and Raquel's like, no, we're not going to do that, because we are discussing the impacts of that word. And I actually just sent her an article today about was it womanism or womanist?
Womanist.
Yeah.
I forgot what the term was.
Womanist, but it's a term I don't feel comfortable using because it's a term that is owned by Black women, and I feel rightfully so, and I love that. But also, I don't want that to become yet another way that white feminism is perpetuating harm by now saying, well, we're going to take that term now and it's going to be our term. And I thought about that. I was like, maybe I should call it a womanist founders, but I'm like, I don't feel that that's a word that I want to do that. I don't want to sort of co-opt that language, but I do love womanists. And so I definitely have women on the show who would identify as womanists and not feminists. And that's great, because to me, that is what that intersectional view of feminism should look like, is to say, I don't really care what term we use, as long as what we all agree is that this is about how do we honor all humanity, which again, that's why, these trans exclusive, whatever they call themselves, TERFs, they're not feminists, right? Like if your feminism doesn't include trans women, then you're not a feminist, at least not in the view that I use. And so if womanist is the term that you use, if it's feminist, if it's something else, great, as long as what we're saying is we believe that all humanity is deserving of dignity and equal treatment under the law and equity. I like the idea of equity-centered founders, but it just didn't sound as good.
When you're shutting the door for the people behind you, it reminds me of women getting into leadership roles, but they're shutting the door, then they're no longer a feminist, or maybe they never were a feminist. They just wanted to climb the corporate ladder. I mean, it's really hard to tell. And it sounds to me like the new podcast and your work in general is built around identifying your core values, like what those are to you as maybe an entrepreneur, a feminist, or a CEO. What are my values around my business, and what do I hope to bring forward? And then how do you, wasn't a question,
but yes, and then how do you walk them? Because I think so much of my work is around values. So I like that you bring that up, because I think, as much as I'm talking about the unlearning process, the relearning process that then happens with clients is getting clear about values. And what most of us do when we do values work for ourselves or our businesses is we look at a list of words and we say, yeah, that one feels really good. But often what's really happening is that should be my work, because so many of the women I work with especially will put family down, like a knee-jerk reaction. Family, that's a value for me, of course. But when we get really honest, for many of them, it isn't. It doesn't mean they don't love their family, but it's not what their life's mission is about. Like, our values, to me, should be those things. What are those hills that you're willing to die on, right? Like, what is it really about? Why are you here? What is the difference you want to make in the world? What is your work about, right? And that's very different often than what you love, what you care about, or what you think you're supposed to aspire to, or what the world is going to judge you for valuing. And so really getting to the truth of what people's values are is such an important part of that, because then it is like, now I know that, and then what does it look like to actually do it? Because it's one thing to hang that up on the wall or put it on your website, but it's very different when push comes to shove, when a client is giving money to Trump and that goes against your value system, or when a client, you can't speak your truth. You can't be honest about what you believe in because it might offend a client. Is that walking your values? I put that challenge out for people. Is that walking your values? Because if it's not, then those values don't matter. You might as well throw them away. Because if they aren't going to actually guide your decisions, they are useless. They are a paperweight that doesn't do anything. And very often that's what I see is happening for most people around values work. And so then they feel like values work is pointless. What's the point? That's a fun little exercise. If that's what it feels like to you, you haven't really done it. If you've done real values work, it should be guiding every decision you're making. As a business owner, it should be going into who are we hiring? what products or offers are we putting out in the world? How are we pricing our offers? I use wherever I can, I use equity-based pricing, because one of my values, what used to be equity, now I call it liberation, but it is freeing ourselves from these systems. And I can't do that when I am not offering a range of prices that honors the various lived experiences of my clients, right? I try on anything that's not my direct one-to-one work, because that is my direct time. But anytime I have a course or anything else, I offer generally 3 price points, and I give people a list of parameters. If this is you, please pay this. If this is you, pay this. That honors, do you have a college degree? Do you have debt? Did you inherit? Are you inheriting money? That I also love, because it's part of the education process of helping people identify their privileges that maybe they haven't yet confronted. Your values should come down to every decision you're making. And if they're not, then you haven't really done the work yet around values in a way that's meaningful.
That's so huge. And I see it just in with starting the podcast, or our podcast. When in the beginning, before we even released our first episode, I was talking to people about it, said what the podcast was and what we were going to concentrate on. And I cannot tell you how many people said, well, but you aren't going to attract as many people if you focus on X, Y, and Z.
Feminist. And they said if you use the word feminist, we wouldn't get as many followers.
Right. And my immediate reaction was, we aren't all things to all people. People need to know going in that this is what we talk about. In previous times in my life where I thought, oh, I'm going to start a business, or I'm going to have this, side thing or whatever. People are like, oh, but that's really hard, because then you have to take literally every customer who comes your way. And I'm like, no, I really don't. If it's my business, I don't have to work with somebody that I feel is harmful to me or harmful to people that I care about. Then they're like, well, you don't know what you're doing. And I'm like, well, then okay, fine. But that's still a decision that I would have to make. Yes, I want to be wealthy, but my values still have to play a part in that.
Yeah. Yeah, it goes into values, and then back to that, also that enough. What's enough? Do I have to appeal to everyone? What is enough? If I had, I don't know whatever numbers that matter, but if I think we lose perspective in this online world that we live in too. We will be so disappointed if, I don't know, whatever, I have 100 people on my email list or something. But if I had 100 people sitting in front of me in a lecture hall and I was reading my email out loud to them, those same people who would be disappointed would probably be terrified, flop sweat. I have to speak in front of 100 people or 1,000 or whatever the number is that you have, right? We get, it's this unchecked greed that is a part of capitalism, and it's not our fault. For everything I do with people, I always come back to compassion, because it's so important to be compassionate with yourself when you're doing the unlearning process, because it's easy to then get into this place, but I don't want to be greedy and I feel bad and I'm bad for having acted that way or done whatever. It's not you. You're in it. How would you not be? You are literally swimming in it nonstop. You wouldn't know anything else until you somebody forces you to see that there is another way. And so it's not about you. And through any of these things, it's easy to get caught in that, I can't believe I behaved that way, or I feel so bad. Again, even my own, checking myself and saying, I feel shame around the fact that I've had all this privilege and whatever. But why wouldn't I? That is that was my experience, of course, until I was confronted and had to make change. It's very easy to be in that and not know. And so it's not your fault, right? It's nobody's fault. But it's what's enough?
Yeah.
What's enough?
So what comes to mind for me is when people are going through this process of unlearning, then what? I can imagine somebody's listening to this and like, okay, fine. So I go through the process and I start unlearning and whatever. Well, then how do I move in the world?
I can only speak from my, again, holding multiple privileged identities and all of the advantages I have. So from my perspective on that, it's twofold. One, it is absolutely liberating, freeing, and feels so good. While on the equally, and it is depressing and overwhelming and difficult, right? I can't speak enough to how it feels to be living into your values, not just having them on the wall and thinking about it, and not someone else's values that you think should be yours, but to finally truly understand what you care about in this world, what matters so deeply, that like your why for existing, and then living that all the time. How liberating that feels, because it means I get to be in my own skin and myself all the time. I don't have to wear a mask. We're all going through life wearing these masks all the time. And that is weighty and it's sad and it doesn't feel good. Like there's nothing that feels better than being truly, truly authentic, and not as a buzzword, but truly showing up. Vulnerabilities and all, like this is me, take me or leave me. And some people are going to leave you, but the ones that stay, oh, the beauty of that, right? It's so beautiful. So all of that, it's so great. And I know that the work I'm doing is meaningful now. Right? It's not like, oh, I'm making somebody else money, or I'm, whatever. I'm just buying more stuff and keeping up with the Joneses. The way I'm moving throughout the world feels meaningful. And like, even if it is just those tiniest little chips out of the wall of white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, it's a chip. It's more than I was doing before, right? Like, and that feels good. So all of that, and it can be really depressing because you're constantly being confronted with your old self and people who had even less learning than your old self, right? And like the crippling feeling of like, this will never change. What can I really do here? No one else is on this journey, especially when you're a blue dot in a red sea where you're in a sea of people who haven't done any of the work. Like it's also really overwhelming and depressing sometimes. That's why self-care is such an important part of this for anyone, whether you have lots of privileged identities or very few. Self-care has got to be a part of your unlearning and then your reemergence, because you will be hit with it again and again, with the fact that not everyone's done the work you're doing. And in fact, a lot of people aren't even interested, or they're actively disinterested in doing that work. So it's both of those things. But would I ever go back to where my life was 15, 20 years ago, where I was that person who was like, how do I keep up with the Joneses, build a bigger house, go on better vacations, drive a nicer BMW, all that stuff, where it all looked great. But inside, I felt kind of dead. Like, no, I would never go back. It would never be worth it.
You really can't anyway. Once you know, you know.
Yeah. Well, you can't once you've let it out of the bag. There's no putting it back in.
Even if you stuff that all back in there.
Even if you wanted to, you can't. But the good news is I don't want to. I wouldn't want to. It does not feel as good as living a truly authentic, honorable kind of life.
The words that you choose to describe that of honorable and meaningful are huge. And I think those are two words that we don't hear enough of when talking about the lives that we lead, like truly the lives that we lead on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I see a lot of people have meaningful lives, but they're not always as honorable, I think. So, yeah.
Wow. Was there anything that you wanted to tell our audience that we didn't specifically ask you about today?
I mean, no, I think this was an amazing conversation. I didn't know where we would go, but this is the stuff, as you may be able to tell, that I'm most passionate about in my life. I know that I'm just one little piece of the world in the coaching space, but I think the things that make you the most frustrated in whatever business you're in are like, that's your calling to like make a change. Like, notice that. What is it about the industry you're in that makes you so mad? And then what are the ways that you change it? Even if it's just you. Again, I can't change the systems, but I can honor those systems. And once I've done that, like I can acknowledge those systems. And once I've acknowledged them, then I think the individual works becomes like, what is the way that I get to somehow affect change, even if it's in the smallest ways? And so me getting to talk about coaching and all of the problems within coaching, because I love coaching, but also the industry is really fucked up. Getting to talk about that makes me really, really happy. So thank you. And
you can tell.
And I'm glad I got a little plug in for the podcast that's coming out. So I hope you'll listen when it comes out.
Keep us posted, because we'll help get the word out for you as well. And I mean, I'm excited to,
and I'll listen
to hear it myself. Yeah.
Thank you. I hope
you'll have two listeners right here. Thank you, Becky.
Thanks for having me.
Great conversation.
And now let's wrap up the show. So enlightening. I love the fact that Becky is so candid about her own process and continued process of unlearning. I mean, I don't know about you, but that's kind of what I look for in somebody. I I'm intimidated by people who are held up as perfect, like they're the guru and they've reached the pinnacle, and that's not even real. Like,
yeah, exactly. Why are you intimidated? That's so fake.
Well, maybe
so
intimidated
fake.
is the wrong word, but
maybe more like
what you yeah, that's it. It's humanizing to see that the person that you are looking to help you is also on that journey and can empathize with where you are,
yeah,
and can show you that there's more on the other side, and having an honorable and meaningful life.
it's big.
That is really big. And I don't think, or at least I'll just speak for myself, I haven't necessarily thought of my life in those two words. Meaningful, yes, because everybody wants their life to have some impact in some way, some meaning to it. But I didn't specifically put the two words together, honorable and meaningful. And that's a huge way to think about it in a very specific way.
Mm-hmm. She reminded me of a few things I had forgotten about, which is really funny. I feel like everything in the universe is sort of timely, right?
Mm-hmm.
This last week, I stopped volunteering on the farm. Substitute teaching is over for the year. Everyone knows I quit my job over a year ago now. My mom died. All of a sudden, I find myself feeling kind of lost. Like, what's my passion? What's my big calling? And then here's Becky, and she says, what is that thing that bugged you when you were working? What's that thing that like drove you nuts? And I remembered, she helped me remember what I really believed was when we set those core values in a business, just like she said, what really frustrated me was that the decisions weren't based on our core values. If you have a core value, then that drives your decision every single time, even if it cuts into profit, and maybe even more specifically if it cuts into profit, because that is who you are. And that ties back to your honorable word. If this is who you say you are, then be it. Or don't say it, because you're not really it. And that's the thing. Sorry, I sound like I'm on a soapbox, but she ignited my passion again.
Get on that soapbox.
And that's the thing that drives me nuts about Amazon, is because I know it's convenient. I get it. I get it that you can go online, you can find it cheaper, and far be it for me to tell people what they can and cannot pay, because I know, like Becky said, I know I have a certain amount of privilege in that. At what cost does it come cheaper with Amazon? It comes cheaper because we're not paying people a wage, because kids in other countries are working to every single garment that we buy, somebody's sewing it together. Who's sewing it together, and how much are we paying them?
Right.
Maybe it would behoove me to have less clothing in my closet.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I don't know. It just, my big beef with Amazon is that Amazon could feed the world. They have enough money.
Absolutely.
We don't have to have world hunger.
Yeah.
And yet we do, from a company who will drop ship something to you overnight, as long as you're willing to pay for it. That's my biggest beef. And I'll be honest, I use Amazon sometimes, not very often. I'm not a very big customer. And almost every time I have a conversation like this, I'm thinking, why did you ever order anything from them? Stop doing it. Because it's not my value. It's not my value. And so I am not in alignment with myself when I order something from Amazon.
But I think a huge part of this is that you are aware of that, and now you can make the change.
Yeah, but I've been aware of it, Raquel.
Oh, okay. See, I'm trying to give you the benefit of that. And basically what I'm trying to do is get you to not beat yourself up so much. And I know this is the pot calling the kettle black, but I'm trying to get you.
You said
shooting and all that.
You said, and Becky said, we said we're gonna live. Tell me the honorable and
meaningful life.
Honorable and meaningful. if I want to be honorable to myself first, this is me. I'm not talking about anybody else. I'm not talking about you. I'm not talking, if I want to be honorable to myself first, I cannot shop from Amazon because I do not believe in their business practices.
Okay, there you go.
I just have to search a little harder for those items I can't find anywhere else. I love what she said about finding your passion, because that has been what in my own life, and I'm sure other people too, like if you want to live a meaningful life, aren't we all searching for, okay, what is that meaning? What is my calling? What am I supposed to be here doing?
Yeah.
Fascinating. I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing that I want to throw out there, because I know I've been in this position before of what am I passionate about? What do I, oh my God, what's my life for? What's my purpose? You can have more than one purpose. You can have more than one calling.
Yep.
You can be passionate about more than one thing, or the things that you're passionate about on their own. They don't have to all be earth shattering. They can piece together to make an honorable and meaningful life for you.
Yeah.
You get to define for yourself what that looks like. You can define success for yourself, not just, well, this is what capitalism and patriarchy say success should look like. And I think that's part of the unlearning, is realizing that your definition may not be the same as what society is telling you, and that's okay.
And not only may not, probably 100% is not. We've been sold.
Yeah, we've been conditioned, and some of us eventually go through the unlearning.
Yep.
Yeah.
Love you, partner.
Love you too, sweetie.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks everyone for listening today. We will be back with more Madness Cafe next week. You can find us on Instagram at Madness Cafe Podcast, or email us at madnesscafepodcast@gmail.com. Bye.